Cyprus, the counterintelligence podcast, hosted by IXN Solutions, the company you turn to for corporate counterintelligence expertise and creators of 351X.
And we're live.
Glenn, that sounded epic. That deep, commanding voice like you were a former drill sergeant. That was awesome. Hey, to our audience out there, this is part 3. And now, mind you, it is a Friday evening when we're recording. And you know what? I look at the screen and there's 6 of us on a Friday evening that have nothing better to do than talk about counterintelligence for hours on end. Our stamina endures. Our passion, it just exudes from the answers that are coming out. And first of all, thank you guys for staying on and continuing to answer these fantastic questions coming in from our guests. Shawn, you're dialing in from your bathroom. It looks like Traci fell asleep a little bit ago. Mike, I don't even know what you're doing. You had a phone call earlier, and Glenn just decided I'm eating snacks. So I'm looking forward to this last half, part 3. And Scott, let's get into it, brother.
Right on. I just want to add that, for those that are just listening to this episode, that you've missed episode 1 and 2 because we've been at this for 4 hours already. All right. So here we go. The question that I have for you guys is this kind of comes from something that West Street had mentioned, as he was moving into his role at NCSC, right? So he talked about a singular, sort of CI career track, right? So CI covers 5 distinct functions, each demanding different skill sets. So, from your perspective, what are the pros and cons of a singular CI career track? And which approach do you think best prepares CI professionals for what's ahead in their careers? And we will start this out with Shawn, and then flow to Mike, then Traci, then Glenn.
Oh boy, here we go. So for the record, I'm not in my bathroom. I'm at a cabin in New Hampshire, and it has limited space. And I can't be out on the deck because we have 2 feet of snow. So Jeremy, thanks for pointing that out. So great question. And I kind of took it maybe a certain way here. I think, and my default setting is always master your craft in counterintelligence, right? And within CI, that means specialization. And that's how you master it. And that's okay. I don't think anyone with the breadth of what we do in counterintelligence can master it all, right? TSCM skill sets are distinctly different from those needed in CI operations. Polygraph examiners should do just that. Collection and ops might be tightly related. That's okay. And investigations and investigators probably should focus on investigations, right? They got to go get FLETC certified. The civilian agents now, they have to master that section 7377 authorities, right? They got to execute those search warrants, serve warrants off posts, and make those off-base arrests. So you should be specializing within counterintelligence. If you're a guy who's mastered ops, do a broadening tour as an investigator, but then get your butt back to ops and teach everyone what you learned, and vice versa. Investigators can benefit broadening in an operations or collections mission. So, for the rest of the group, I really just pulled out the definitions of counterintelligence. And I want to present them, if Jeremy, you're good with that at this time. And the reason I say that is we get some junior listeners to the podcast, and they may not always know what counterintelligence is defined as. So I took the Department of War definition, which is very much rooted in Executive Order 12333. So the definition, not down below, this is down below from the definition in a DoD instruction. The definition of counterintelligence is your information gathered and your activities conducted to identify, deceive, exploit, disrupt, or protect against espionage, other intelligence activities, sabotage, assassinations that are conducted for or on behalf of foreign powers, organizations, or persons, or their agents, or international terrorist activities. So quick comment on that. Did I say foreign intelligence entity in there? I didn't, right? It's on behalf of foreign organizations. And there's a cool debate that goes on very often when it comes to like China. People will say CCP and they'll say, well, is that the intelligence service? Is that our mission? And when you look at the definition of CI, I say, I believe it all is, right? Because it's at the direction of a foreign power. And then it's the Department of War policy that CI activities are undertaken as part of an integrated Department of War and national effort to detect, identify, assess, exploit, penetrate, degrade, and counter or neutralize espionage, intelligence collection, sabotage, sedition, subversion, assassination, and terrorist activities conducted for or on behalf of foreign powers, organizations, persons, or their agents directed against U.S. national security interests or the Department of War and its personnel, information, material, facilities, and activities. So that's a pretty cool definition, right? If we use those definitions in what we're doing, I think it matters because it really broadens the scope of what we do in counterintelligence, especially in the Department of War. Now, under that, there's 4 CI missions. We counter espionage, international terrorism, and the insider threat. We do support to force protection. We support the Defense Critical Infrastructure Program, and we support research, development, and acquisition programs. Those are our 4 missions. And finally, down to the functions of counterintelligence, this is the means. This is how we do it. Collections, operations, investigations, functional services, and I lump together CI analysis and production. So hopefully that's a good scene setter for the crew to kind of riff off that and talk a little bit more about the NCSC's question. Over.
Awesome, Shawn. That's all. Mike, I think you're picking up the mantle here now.
Yeah, and thanks, Shawn, for kind of setting the stage with that, because I think, as I look at this question too, it's a great question, but I think we can easily get pigeonholed into just like the 5 functions. It's so much more than that, right? I mean, at the end, that is like I said, that's at the very end. There's so much more to it, and how do we educate? How do we train? How do we manage that? So, to your point, I think it's this, right? It's like, if given the opportunity, King for a day, they said, Mike Dye, you get to decide that everybody's going to be a singular CI career track. Well, who gets to decide what part of that do I want to do? Is it just CI? Do I want to go do TSCM? Do I want to go investigations? So there's a lot of discussion on how that could actually even work and what would be right. I think the bigger answer is, what is it that the Department of War needs counterintelligence to do, right? And then from there, you decide how are we going to break that down to do it. I think if we put the cart before the horse and say we're going to do these functions and focus on that, it may be a little bit too early. I think that if it's broken out, or if it were to be its own career track like that, then as long as we talked about, it's got to be the resources, it's got to be the training, it's got to be the oversight, all those things, and it can't be just kind of a lip service overview of that. There's some real detail that would have to go into that. So I think in a big picture, something like that could be done, but there's a lot of work that would have to be done with it. I'm not saying I'm against or for it. I think it's something that it's going to take a lot more discussion. And I appreciate, Mr. Street's thought up there as he sits up there at the NCSC to think about, how do we want to get after the bigger problem set, and how are we going to affect change within the counterintelligence enterprise? Again, Glenn uses this word all the time. It's all about the enterprise. How do we better it for the Department of War, for the whole of government at some point down the road? And then, Shawn, you said it, or I'll just repeat it. It's mastering the craft. Whatever your role is as a CI agent at the field office, region office, if you're doing ops, investigating, whatever, master that craft as you progress through your career, enlisted officer, warrant officer. That's where it starts. And then know that you can do that job every day. Those above us are going to make the decisions on where we need to go and how am I going to plug into that and do my very best and be part of that solution moving forward to get after, to counter the adversary's efforts to do harm to us. That's it.
Okay. I think I'm up next.
You are indeed.
Jeremy, for the record, I just want you to know that I was not falling asleep. I was not. I just want you to know that. So I may have looked like it, but I wasn't. So I took a little bit of a different approach to this, because I think I had to look at it, or not had to, but I had a tendency to look at this from a training perspective. And what I see is when we talk about foundational and some of the qualities that I wanted for foundational training is the baseline. It's the baseline. And as we progress in our careers, we may eventually specialize. But in some instances, it's going to be specializing for one assignment or for one opportunity. And I think hand in hand with that, as opposed to a singular track, is ensuring that when we manage the talent, we also manage the training that is needed for those specialized pieces of counterintelligence that we may find ourselves doing. And I think it is an idea that we could look at in the future. I just don't know if right now that is something that we can do. I appreciate the fact that we do have individuals who specialize in certain things. You all are a perfect example of that. Even though within your specialization, you had a niche that you specialized in inside your specialization. And so I think having the foundational skills that all CI agents need to have is first and foremost. And as you mature through your career, whether you stay for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you're going to end up finding a niche or something that you, one or two, maybe even three, that you prefer, that you find you enjoy. And if our career track allows you to do those, that's wonderful. But I do think it's important for us to have the basic skills, and all CI agents need to have them based on the fact that we may be thrown into a situation that may not necessarily be our niche, but we need to know at least foundationally what we need to do and how we need to proceed in that challenge. So while I think it's an idea that may have its time, I just don't think this is the time. Over.
Very insightful. I like it. All right, Glenn, you're going to bring us home on this topic.
Yeah, so interesting question here. And yeah, so if I was voting today, I'd say no. We don't need to go to a singular trike. If I was voting today and if I had a role, which I don't, so I just have an opinion. So no, I don't think we need to go to a singular trike. And the reason why is, you know, when I look at counterintelligence and I look at those 5 functions, I view them as they are complementary, not in conflict with one another. Even, you know, yeah, there's a lot of niches and eaches and this and that, like Shawn highlighted TSCM, for example. TSCM exists within counterintelligence, though, specifically for counterintelligence. You know, it's different than going out for law enforcement and doing some activity, right? The process by which we, it's kind of like surveillance, right? For Shawn and Mike, the great surveillance professionals amongst us, and Sparky. And I'm only saying that, Jeremy, because of those assignments, right? But you know, it's like that, right? So there's a difference in aggressive, right? Aggressive surveillance and discrete surveillance, right? Both being, you know, practical application for an objective. And I view the 5 functions the same way. They are complementary. You know, there's this discussion about tactical versus strategic and all of that, right? No, a counterintelligence agent should know, back to the points made earlier, their craft. They should master their craft, as Mike and Shawn already highlighted. Mastering my craft doesn't mean I am a TSCM practitioner. It means that I understand, not only understand, I comprehend the practical application of all 5 functions of counterintelligence. And more importantly, every capability within that. So I still to this day, when I teach counterintelligence, educate on counterintelligence, speak about it to the unknown, I tell them one of the simplest ways to tell seniors our capabilities is to put it in a bucket that they understand, right? And say, hey, yeah, we have offensive capabilities, defensive capabilities, and then we have these special teams, right? And everyone knows, I'm a football analogy guy, right? Because it has those three components, right? There are other sports that have it, but this one is so clearly defined, right? You have an offense, a defense, and special teams. And those are our capabilities that we bring to bear. So they complement each other. If you start making decisions about a singular focus of counterintelligence, well, perhaps if you're resourced like that and your resources are never never going to be taken away in a time of need, perhaps you could do that. You could have all those specialties, and no, I don't think it's going to happen. Number one. Number two, how do I function as a counterintelligence agent without understanding how this potential investigation I picked up might actually be a great operation, might actually be a plug for some other center, agency, organization as a piece of their analytical product that puts a bigger piece of the puzzle together for the nation, right? How do I do all that if you don't train me, educate me, and teach me to execute in that manner? So and so when you talk about cons, it goes back to some of the things we talked about earlier. Let's not create one-trick ponies that will be the first to get cut when resources change, right? When they say, well, I got a guy that can do three things and you can do one. So I'm just going to take the guy that can do all three of those and cut you, right? Let's not create that level of risk when it comes to our resourcing of the future. And then team of teams concept, right? Yes, I think we are doing a good job in the Army, but we obviously got a lot of room for doing better by having a special program that we all near and dear come from, minus Traci. But I think right? I think you guys highlighted earlier, it's unique, it's special, but then within that, there are teams of teams, right? And it is a very small portion of a capability. It is not the capability, right? So you still have within that, I master my craft. I know that if I need additional capability, I know that I have that capability available to me. And then the last thing I'm going to say, and it's very provocative, it ties back to where I finished. If Jeremy, as you cited, we've increased investigations by 40% over the last year or whatever it was. Imagine an environment where we employ every counterintelligence agent, every single one of them in the fight, to acknowledge that while I don't have the authority to conduct an investigation, I have the requirement to ensure that the investigations are reported, that the information is put in the system. Instead, we had, and it's still out there, we created an environment where agents that were not in certain units thought they didn't have the obligation to even acknowledge the requirement that this should be reported, because I don't do investigations, they do. So if you create this environment where you begin to separate these things distinctly out, you are going to then create your own internal barriers to efficiencies and production. So I would provocatively say, if it's 40% today, if we ever employ it, as I have always beat the drum to employ it, it'll be 80% tomorrow, because there's more eyes and ears engaged in the problem set. More investigations, more operations, more collections. It'll be more everything, because you're putting every agent in the fight, not necessarily by the authority to do it, just simply requiring them to partner, collaborate, and produce. Thank you. Over.
Amen, Glenn. That was well put, man. The five functions, like you said, they're totally complementary. They should feed and inform, one another. What's the best thing for Team America is what it boils down to, right? So, is an investigation going to inform an operation, or is an operation going to inform an investigation, collection, whatever, right? So, amen. So, Shawn, did I see that you had an alibi you wanted to throw into the mix?
I do. I wanted to riff off something Glenn said. Since it's getting late and we're all getting punchy, I'm going to throw it out there, right? So something provocative. Use of SOC, the SOF Enterprise, SOCOM, counterintelligence organization. Not for everything they do, but they have counterintelligence authorities, and they view themselves as solely a SOF organization. They have these authorities to leverage in the accomplishment of their SOF mission, and they don't always look at it that way. So I'd love to see a paradigm shift where these organizations look at it and go, of all the things I do, because they can be like, oh, I have I have, IO, I have PSYOPs, I have this, they look at all those things as under their umbrella, but not CI, even though they are, and they have very, very specific authorities. I just throw that out there to be a little bit provocative. I'd love to see that change in the SOF enterprise. Over.
Hey, can I also stir the pot here a little bit? Because, sorry, Glenn, I'm not 100% on board with this. And let me explain why, though. First of all, every individual is going to be different. I listened to Danny Lewis's story, and for our audience out there, if you haven't, you should. He recognized he wanted to do investigations. Thank God. His tenacity, his dedication, and expertise in the craft brought somebody to trial the Army was ready to give up on. Charged with espionage. Amazing. Danny Lewis, thank you so much for protecting America. When Glenn, I hear you say, a generalist, be better at 3 functions of counterintelligence than 1 function of counterintelligence, it concerns me a little bit, because are we going to become a jack of all trades vice a master of none? And are we going to pigeonhole ourselves into being generalists to where we can't do an effective investigation to have the tenacity of Danny Lewis? And are we going to have the impatience of conducting an operation or a collection activity, and it's going to fall to the side because we just don't have those requisite skills? I do think that 5 functions of counterintelligence are distinctly different, and a person would have to self-assess, what is my passion? What do I want to do? And then most importantly, what can I do? I want to throw that in here to the pit.
Yeah.
Jeremy,
I hear you loud and clear, brother. And I actually hear agreement in most of it. And I hear just a little bit of separation. So I just want to come back and clarify. When I use the analogy about and I'm just throwing something out there, but I have a live example that I'm going to throw out now. When I say 3 in 1, my mind is on the fiduciary, the funding lines being cut, right? When you look at SIGINT as an example, right? If you go back in history, again, I'm not the history guy, Mike is, but if you just go back 10, 15 years ago with SIGINT, they had, 10 different MOSs in SIGINT. And because at the end of the day, because of resources, and we had to cut, MI had to cut, they combined, what they used to call the people that, just listen to stuff out. They combined a lot of those, right? And so, matter of fact, the Russian linguists, right? Cold War is over. Cold War is over. I don't need all these Russian linguists. So I'm going to cut them, right? I think that was a bad idea because, here we are. But that's an example of what I'm talking about. So when I say the 3 to 1, I'm talking more along the lines of protecting our future in the resources. And when I say that specifically, I will be explicit and say, I don't think we need only CI investigators, only CI operations practitioners. No, I don't. If that's where our line of disagreement is, that's where it's at. But I'm explaining to you why I don't. Now, I'm going to tell you who tries to sell themselves against us, and it works in their circles. The Marine Corps, MITAF CI HUMIT. They sell themselves to commanders all the time, and Shawn and I dealt with this in the combatant commands, and they're outpacing the Army in the discussion when the Army is not in the room, because they will tell commanders and senior intel officers, send me downrange because I can do both CI and HUMIT, and by training, and Traci's mentored, you certified their course, right? They can, but the reality is, when you look at their stats and their production, they are doing HUMIT. And they will also get in the room and say, we don't do CI, we do HUMIT, if they're in certain rooms, right? So my point when I say 3 in 1, so that MITAF CI HUMIT individual is saying, I can do two things and they can only do one, send me. And in some commander or decision maker's mind, oh, I got a 2-for-1. I'm going to send you and not send the CI professional. That's the risk we run when we go down these singular tracks. Another example that Scott is very familiar with MICEP. MICEP, historically, we were invested heavily in the, they were a form of LNO. I forget the program. Help me out, Sparky. They were LNO program, like Germany specific, Korea specific.
MLOs, yeah.
MLOs, thank you.
Yeah.
We were heavily invested in our MLOs. And again, we talked about earlier, co-error, right? It was the right thing to do. But guess how and why they got cut later on, right? The individuals who were one-trick ponies, when MICEP funding and bigger decision makers, INSCOM and G2, were saying to us, you got to cut, you got to cut, you got to cut. They started the same thing that SIGIT did. They said, oh, we don't need these Russian folks anymore. Let's cut them. We don't need these folks. Let's cut them. And so that's the risk. And I'll stop there because I know Traci had something there. I'll stop.
Well, you basically said it when you talked about the resources. When we're fat and happy, we can actually enjoy those singular tracks, those multiple singular tracks. But when things get slim and we know that there's an accordion effect inside, the Department of Defense or the Department of War, when we start losing resources, i.e. money, and we have to start cutting, then where do we cut when we have all of these single tracked CI agents? How do we do that? And I think that's the issue. So it's not really, it's if we had a way to ensure that we were always going to have the resources that we needed, then this would be a great idea. But we never know that. And we have seen in history that it happens, we get fat, then we get really, really skinny. And when you start getting skinny, who do you cut? And where do you cut? I think that's the challenge.
Well, and I will add, we get cut because, again, it's an understanding on what it is that counterintelligence does. And so, again, it starts way back when we started from his leadership, us explaining to them, here's our worth, here's what we're doing for the commander, here's what we're doing for the government, whatever that is. There's just a misunderstanding. And so then they just look at this. If somebody, a senior is listening to this conversation right now, they're like, you guys are all fractured. You got 5 different things. I don't understand what all that is, right? And so we would be like, yeah, that's exactly the point. So it's all comes back to just being able, starting with explaining the mission set, the function, the why of counterintelligence, whether it's Army or DoD or whatever it is, why we're here and what it is. And then that ties into, what it is that we're going to do. Just a thought.
I at the risk of you guys, cutting off my link here, Jeremy, I got one more point I got to make on this discussion, brother. It's super important to me, right? So again, resourcing, funding, all that, we just covered that. But let's just talk about the craft itself and the application of the capability of counterintelligence and the craft. If we were to go a singular track, I think we would create our own internal firewalls to knowledge and understanding of application of capability. And when Traci was talking, what triggered in my brain is something that we actually are using today in SOCOM to Shawn's point, to re-educate everyone in SOCOM, starting with our agents first, but everyone, right, commanders too, about the capability of counterintelligence. We use this acronym, PEN, like the pen you carry in your pocket. And we talk about it from a standpoint of what does counterintelligence do as well, right? Protect, exploit, and neutralize, right? And the visual graphic makes it easy for whoever we're talking to, the commander of SOCOM, to understand simply right there in a nutshell, right? PEN, protect, exploit, neutralize. We've got offense, defense, special teams. So, brother, here's where I'm going with this. I'm an old guy, so I use with folks 2 things. I say, innovation-wise, one time we were talking 3D. Now, I don't know what we're at. I call it 5D, right? We're at AI is really where we're at, AI and machine learning, right? But I call it 5D. And I say to young agents everywhere and to seniors, quite frankly, when you look at a problem set, imagine my phone being the problem set. when you look at that problem set, China, Russia, you name it, you need to be able to see that in 5D. When someone, you say, see something, report it, right? See something, say something. Well, when someone walks in my door, and this is my point, I don't care what agent, what patch you're wearing, what organization, when someone comes to my door to report something, they just gave me a problem. When I look at the problem, I need to be, as a professional CI agent, I need to be able to look at that problem and go, I don't have an investigation, I don't have an operation, but perhaps I have an opportunity to collect. Oh, I don't have either one of those bigger three, but perhaps I should write a report anyway for some other analytical element to be able to put a piece of the puzzle together, which gets to the analysis and production, right? That's my whole point. If you don't, all those things to me complement each other. They really do. And every time and any time we try to separate them, we're going to create a different problem. That's my opinion. Over.
Yeah, that's awesome. We always talk about effects-based, operations, in our sort of niche. But I would submit to you, it doesn't matter which, one of those 5 functions we're talking about. Every one of those functions individually has the ability to cause an effect against our adversaries. So we should all be working, cognizant of all the different, pieces of the puzzle and able to implement them accordingly. So I dig that, Glenn. All right, Jeremy, it's on you, man. What's up next?
All right, I appreciate that, and Glenn, we are on the same page. Fundamentally, foundationally, we are all CI individuals, and for our next question, first of all, I'm going to give Chuck a shout out just down the road in San Antonio, and this is a fantastic book. If y'all haven't read this, you need to read it. So Jim Collins, Good to Great, emphasized getting the right people on the bus and in the right seats. From your experience in counterintelligence, how do you identify the place to put these right people in the right roles? And how do you measure whether they're actually being effective? The order, Mike, Glenn, Shawn, and Traci. Mike, over to you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so thanks for Chuck for sending that. So I take the position that I call it talent management, right? That's the definition of putting the right place at the right person at the right place at the right time. That it has to be managed. And I think Traci mentioned it, earlier, that's something that we have, as an army within the counterintelligence field, have really not cracked the net on yet. And if we're going to succeed, I believe, as an enterprise, and then talent management has to be one of the first things that gets addressed. What I believe, Mike and I's opinion, is that we run the risk and make sure we're not. I don't believe we should make it personality based. I think we all know folks in our career field that says, I've known Mike Dye and he's a great guy and he's a hard worker. I want him in a heartbeat. I know Traci Goodwin. I didn't like her. She's not part of this team. We've traditionally, I think, been too cloistered that way, where our personalities, strong-willed personalities, maybe outplay and overtake, the reality of what we need for talent management. I think that getting a process in place, having a fair evaluation, mentoring folks, having having a certification and feedback is all part of that, right? So I think we all grew up in a time where, I know I did in my early days, was like, people would just tell me, you would know if I'm not doing the right thing or not. And if I didn't do it, then they didn't come out and tell me, Mike, that you just hose this all up, you're done. I just knew, and you were done, right? I think you have to have it. And the greater part of me, as I've learned, is things got to kind of be in writing, right? You got to be able to put it down and say, here's where you need to improve. You're doing great in this things. You need to show improvement in here, so I can actually work to be a better counterintelligence professional. If you don't tell me that, I'm never going to get there. And I think all too often, historically, we shunned people. We pushed people out because they didn't fit that necessarily. I'll call it a click, whatever it was. I didn't fit that mold for whoever we were working for at the time. So you have to have a fair certification process that has goals and milestones and actionable, achievable things that you can do and what's realistic, and then feedback to that, and then some accountability to that. I think is the other thing, and it's not being mean-spirited, but we have folks, and there will be in the future that maybe this craft is just not for them. There's nothing wrong with that, right? We should be able to say, hey, maybe this is not your niche. Here's something else. You're great at doing something else, in a nice way to say that, obviously. But all that to say, we want folks that are going to thrive and become great further CI professionals, but we owe it to them and we owe it to ourselves and the enterprise to be honest and fair brokers of that. And until we have a system, a management system to do that, then it's just personality. It's very subjective, and it becomes Mike like this, Glenn likes this, Shawn likes that. And I just don't think that's I don't think that's a recipe for success moving forward. And so that's where I would hope that that's, my goal would be that's something that we would look at from the enterprise perspective, is to set in what's the right standards for talent management to make sure. And then sometimes it's, we lucked. I will offer that I think all of us lucked into different jobs we came into. I didn't come into this program to say I'm going to go do this thing. I just wanted to get here and do the job, and I kind of made my way through there and through performance and success. Even since I got there, it wasn't, I had a goal to get there, but it wasn't like something I was like, this is what I'm jumping into right away. I think that everybody has a little bit of a niche there, and we capitalize on it, and you get those strengths and weaknesses of people, because some people are really good at one thing and other things. And how do you manage that all for the greaterness of the enterprise? So that's my thought over.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Mike. Really talent management capability versus person. And I appreciated every one of you to help me through my whole career. And, why would you want to do a job you're not going to succeed at anyway? Talent manage somebody out. Hey, Glenn, over to you, sir.
Yeah, so Mike hit the nail right on the head out of the gate. So I'm going to do it in my way, compliment it. Yeah, talent management. This is a discussion about owning talent management. And, as we're talking about the Army, and Army certainly has not gotten this right yet. But I will also put a plug and say that, and I said it when I was in the uniform walking around having engagements. There's one place the Army is doing the best at it right now today. That's not to say it's perfect, but it's that program, right? That we talk about near and dear to our heart. And we all went in, starting from Sparky, actually, when I look at the chain of events here, we all went into that program and took it over and began to make it better than we found it, right? And part of making it better than we found it actually was this very discussion. It was this very discussion about how do we do a better job of managing our people from a talent management standpoint, from a career management standpoint, right? So comprehensively, because you could be the greatest talent in the world, you're still in the Army, you still have to get promoted, et cetera, et cetera. So if we don't get that right, we're losing people out of the Army because they're not getting promoted, right? And the Army is saying, okay, QMP or whatever, right? We're going to separate you, qualitative management program, et cetera, right? So it really comes down to that. And then when we took a look at it, and this is where we extrapolated to the Army, the bigger Army, and Traci and I worked on this, and she was saying it earlier. We look at our existing model of how we do talent management. It's the same to even call it, which is why I'm doing air quotes, right? At HRC, the assignments management, right? We look at that process. Yeah, so here's the deal. Talent management and owning it means owning it from accessions and recruitment, right? You applied, or I met you, I invited you, whatever, accessions and recruitment to employment as a career through retirement and beyond. That's what owning it means. And it means investing in your people that way so that you can get them from point A all the way to point Z, which is retirement. And that doesn't stop military, because you might roll over and become a civilian. That's what we emphasize too. Like, hey, our goal is to make this a feeder thing, right? So that we continue to feed, and you retire, many years later, maybe age whatever, right? We're all retiring younger nowadays, which is a good thing, but still. And then how do you measure that? Again, when you own talent management, you own it all. So now you get back to where several folks have talked about effects-based metrics, right? I got to have effects-based metrics. You don't get to just hang out and suck oxygen, right? You have to produce. And if I'm doing it right, I'm going to create, we laughed about the old days of the SQT. Well, that was a form of effects-based metrics. Either you knew your job and you passed those tests, or you didn't, right? And then, the consequences were there. So we have to invest in the accessions and recruiting process with something beyond simply fill out an application, right? And we're doing this to a degree. We revived it, right? We came back and got the defibrillator out and brought it back to life. And then guess what? You know, a general out of Fort Huachuca decided, oh, it was too much, and so he cut half of it, right? The accessions process. You have to invest in the assessment of who you're bringing in, right? You have to invest in that. And this is where I say, yeah, our little program, we improved this thing to make it better. Invest in the assessment. And then, as Mike said, hold people accountable. Gets back to effects-based metrics. If you're not cutting it and this job is just not for you, perhaps there's a better job somewhere else in our Army for you. So at the end of the day, own talent management. Thank you.
Yeah, Glenn, that's spot on. Really assess for potential and not productivity. What does this individual have that can bring to, in our case, the counterintelligence program at large? And spot on, Glenn. Thank you. And you know, I do have to say, you pushed me out of my comfort zone when you're my career manager. And if our audience could see the screen, we have 18 years of career management going on right in front of us, and that's just Glenn. Um, and then everybody else as well. So, but I will say, you pushed me outside of my comfort zone. You know, I wanted to go somewhere, and you're like, no, that's not the best. And I went to JCTA, and hands down, Glenn, that was one of my most, I think, personally impactful assignments. And looking back, that was phenomenal talent management at its finest. You know, I'm going to pass the baton over to Shawn.
It's funny you say that about JCTA. You and Glenn in that scenario. Mike and I had the same one, like, unfold. Fought it tooth and nail. Great assignment. Great assignment. Absolutely what I needed. Made me so much better in the craft, right? So, you know, talent cultivation, you guys using talent management, same thing. I try to call it talent cultivation sometime, but I mean, same thing in, you know, interchangeably. Yeah, Mike, you identified something I needed, and you made me do it. And, you know, I used it for years and years to come. I still use it. So I talked about that earlier, right? What I learned at JCTA, that was really my advanced course. So appreciate that. So I think, Chuck, back to the question, Chuck, good question, right? Thanks for posing this to the group. I think it's pretty cool conversation. So in my time as career manager, I learned quite a few things. And first off, you know, about getting people on the bus and all that, everyone has different abilities, and that's okay. Everyone develops at a different pace, and that's okay. Our goal should be to cultivate talent and get everyone to reach their personal best. That's what our goal should be, right? Everyone doing their personal best, we all win. So I don't think that getting folks on the bus, you know, based on that book, you're trying to fit one mold. Everyone's career path, my career path, is different than everyone's on the screen, and as it should be, right? Because it's an individual journey. So I don't think it's about selecting individual seats on the bus, but it's about setting people up for their next challenge, setting people up to be developed, setting people up for the next set of growth that they're going to go through. And that's how you manage your talent and you cultivate it. And it's certainly continuous. I know that, there's always a counterpoint to stuff. So I'll say for the Statlers and Waldorfs in the balcony, for those folks out there that think everyone just needs to be doing what they think they should be doing, I think they got to take a step back and say, cultivation doesn't require that, right? Cultivation requires folks getting out there and being uncomfortable and learning, and not just staying in the same roles and same organizations for a career. I also say there is no room for holding people back and gatekeeping. I just think that's bad. We got to, if someone wants to go, let them go. If they're going to fail, they got to own that failure, right? Like, try to push them. My youngest daughter, she's a chef, and I love this mantra she has. She's like, you got to let me cook, right? Like, you put people in positions, you set them up, and then you got to let them cook. So talent cultivation and talent management is a team sport. Individual accomplishment, that's on the person, right? They got to walk through the door and do it. And when you pair the two things up, I think you got magic. Chuck, part of it you asked is, how do you know it's working? Is you got to monitor these things over time. and you follow people through their careers, and you learn and you get feedback like on screen, just unfolded. 18 years of career management. Jeremy telling Glenn, you gave me something I needed, and I'm like, yeah, Mike did the same thing for me, same assignment, right? That's how you learn, and you know these things are working. So like I said, performance is individual. That talent management and cultivation is a team sport, and I think that's how it all comes together. So great question, Chuck. Good to hear from you again as well. That's all I have.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, spot on, Shawn. Thank you. I want to echo one thing you said as well. You know, knowing your people and knowing their capability and watching as they move through their military career. Significant life events happen often. People get married, they get divorced, they have kids, they have adoptions, right? That changes a person's motivation. And a part of talent management is to know your people. Traci, over to you.
Well, thank you. And I do think this is a very good question. And of course, I'm the only one on the screen who is not, or has not been in the program. So when I look at it from my perspective in the big Army, I have to say that the answer to the first question of how do you identify and place the right talent in the right roles? How do you measure whether or not, that's the second part, but whether or not it's paying off. But in the big Army, we don't do that. We don't do it. It is the luck of the draw, and it is perseverance in some instances. Within the last 2 years, the talent management process has changed, where there is what we now call the marketplace. I don't think there's enough data to determine whether that is better than the old process. And of course, the old process was you had a branch manager, your branch manager saw a hole, and you were a peg. And they put you in that peg because the hole was empty. It didn't necessarily mean that that was good for your career. It didn't necessarily mean that it was going to be a rewarding thing. And in some instances, sometimes they flourished or they perished. And so with the marketplace, there are positions that are listed for your particular rank or grade, and you can apply. You basically put in a resume, and you're competing with other individuals who put in their resume. There's a possibility of an interview process, and then the decision is made. If there's only one person who applies, then you probably are going to get that. And if it's what you wanted, that's great. If it's not, then you're stuck with it. So I say to that in the big Army that no, talent management is not done. It's not done effectively. You might get lucky in the old system where the branch manager was someone you knew and you could maybe get a favor. Or you might have an O grade who needs a particular or wants a particular person and uses what used to be called a silver bullet to get you in that position. So that is not a comprehensive, holistic way to conduct talent management. It just isn't. And so has it paid off? I think the answer for the Army has been in some ways yes, because there are people who are going to make the best of whatever situation they find themselves in or whatever assignment they receive. In other instances, it can discourage people, and it can facilitate a quicker exit from the Army. I will say that I've had the blessing of being able to navigate that, but there were some assignments that I wasn't particularly crazy about, but you go in there and you make the best of it, and you pray that it works out. It worked out. But from my perspective, it needs a lot of work, and especially for counterintelligence agents. I think I've said it throughout these last almost 5 hours now, that we need to manage our own people. We need to own our people and make those decisions. It's a model that you in the program have that I think, and I think the NCSC needs to take a look at this. We need to manage our own talent. We need to manage our own training. We've had that discussion, but the talent piece is crucial to making the best decisions and maximizing the resources that we have that are, as we've spoken about, in times of famine, very limited. That's all I have.
Oh,
So if I could add then, so we saw it when with the stand up of CI command, and we said that early on, if they don't get talent management done and correct, it's one of those things that's just never really going to meet its full potential, because you're right. At some point, soldiers that are airborne are going to Fort Bragg, and they're going to sit at the 82nd, and they're going to sit there at the 519th or whatever, and very rarely do, you know, counterintelligence. They fix that now, as they're obviously working with the regions to do that. But all that to say, we know, and I appreciate all of us had the luxury of doing what we always touted as individualized career talent management, right? So that position for that person based on family needs, education, or whatever. And I think not a risk, but something that I think we'll recognize is that we always got a lot of pushback from that from outside of the program, right? Because they looked at it as you're just taking care of your own. Well, yes and no. I mean, we're very small. When you're talking folks, it's easier to manage that. But there was always this, and it still is a stigma that still kind of continues, where they say, well, you put this person, the command didn't get a say, this person's here. And it's all about the discussion and the coordination, and that has to happen with that. I would just offer what's interesting, and we're going to see where it goes with AIM, how that's gotten better, because again, it's a dating system. It's what it is. I like you, you like me, and it's a good thing. It looks great on paper. Maybe they didn't. Maybe those commanders interviewed those agents. You don't know till you get there, right? And then you kind of have to live with what you pick there. What's interesting from our former program perspective is our brethren on the other side have now implemented something similar with the AIM marketplace. And I'm not sure how that effect is going yet, but that's what they decided to do. And they make it as like, well, here's all the positions, and everybody gets to talk about it, and everybody gets to opt into where they go. It briefs well, but in a smaller population that's kind of unique and specialized, does that really work? So I think both of those will kind of tell the future, but it all comes back to talent management and tracking folks like that.
Yeah.
And Traci, you also said something I want to echo, right? Make the best of a bad situation. You might not get the assignment you want, but you know what? Make the best of it. I look back at Dave Turner's story, and I mean, he went to an office that was a Sleepy Hollow, but he made a significant impact because he knew his craft and he was aggressively getting out there to do those roles and responsibilities. So for anybody listening, if there's a place you're at and you don't really care for it, make the best of it.
Yep.
Absolutely. Sorry, Trace. Yeah, Jeremy, you triggered a thought there, and I would just add, from a career manager's perspective or talent manager perspective, as Tracy said, all the holes ultimately need to be filled. And sometimes you run out of a particular pool of talent, but the hole still needs to be filled. And so you pick the next best, person to go fill the hole. And that's where you fall back on, if you're in the hole, you're in that job, do the best you can at that job. And again, utilize all the resources available to you. But yeah, at the end of the day, there's only so much to go around, and someone has to fill the hole still. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, team. And let's move on to the next question. So this one, I mean, you probably hit home probably a little bit better than for some of y'all, because, well, you'll see. From your knowledge or your experience, because some of you probably date back this far, of history, what's your favorite counterintelligence stories, and what lessons does it offer for today's CI professionals? And we're going to start with Shawn.
All right, I'm going to take the patron saint of the activity there, Sergeant Daniel Bissell from the Revolutionary War. And for those of us who remember, we had the ugliest, most god-awful portrait of him painted with these terrible colors from the 1970s, which was huge and hung on the wall. And thanks to Sergeant Major, he made it to like every dining out with us. But he's the one. I love that history story. So Sergeant Daniel Bissell, Revolutionary War, is the only spy personally decorated by George Washington. He was a proven Continental Army soldier, and he was tasked by Washington to deliberately desert and go behind British lines in New York. So the CI at play. His mission wasn't just collection. His primary objective was to convince the British that New York, not Yorktown, was the main target for the Continental Army. And what he did is he kept the British forces fixed and divided. So pretty amazing stuff, especially for what was that, like 1775, I think. So the execution of it, that dude lived his legend. He memorized all sorts of British and defenses and preparations when he finally came back. In order to get to the British, he accepted being officially listed as a deserter. His legend was so complete and so convincing that his own hometown for 100 years believed he was a traitor. It never came out the truth until some historian, stumbled across it. So the outcome of his actions, the British forces did in fact stay divided. Washington succeeded in Yorktown. Bissell was awarded this thing called the Badge of Military Merit. So that's a precursor to today's Medal of Honor and Purple Heart. And finally, after this historian realized who they actually had living in their small town, or from their small town, I should say, they changed his gravestone, and it now says he had the confidence of Washington and served under him. So it's a pretty amazing story. But old Sergeant Daniel Bissell, his portrait is lost once again. It's crazy. It's gone. It's left the conference room that it was at. Even though it survived a fire, it got put up in a conference room, left that conference room, got rescued again, brought to another organization, put in the conference room, gone again. And I think someone has them at their residence, like, as the keeper of Sergeant Daniel Bissell. But I'd love to see him return to his glory. That's what I have as my inspirational story from history. Over.
I love it, Shawn. So is it also in a bathroom in somewhere middle of nowhere?
No, I don't.
Area?
I would have Sergeant Bissell hanging right here because that man's a patriot. But I do not.
True.
I do not.
I know who has it. The retired MISEP
boy.
has it. I do know right here. I exactly know because I convinced her to take it when she retired because nobody wanted it in the building. So I know exactly who has it.
Yeah, that thing needs to get put up somewhere.
I think we need to have a conversation outside of this and figure a campaign out. But I digress. That's outside this, gentleman and lady.
And thanks to that person for rescuing Sergeant Bissell once again.
That's right. Traci, over to you, please.
Well, I took someone from experience, and it's actually someone that I worked with in the Pentagon. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about Linda Matthews. I don't know who knows her, but I think it's fascinating that she joined the Army or enlisted in the Army in 1963. And originally, her MOS was the 97 Delta, the Military Intelligence Coordinator course. And so she was assigned to the 112th Intelligence Corps way back in 1964. And she was at Fort Sam Houston, Texas. But I think it was in a few years later when she decided to become a counterintelligence agent, and she went to Fort Holabird for her training. And she actually, when she became a warrant officer in 1984, was one of 11 female warrant officers in the entire Army, which I think is amazing. I had the pleasure of working with her when I was in the Pentagon for my first few years. She retired in 2019, but she has done virtually every intelligence or counterintelligence mission or function that there was at the time. She went to the Presidio of Monterey, California. She was a linguist in Czech, and in the Army's infinite wisdoms assigned her to the Czech Republic. She was actually turned down for an assignment because she was a female, and she fought with the commander to actually get that assignment. She had to fight to get an assignment that her command thought she wasn't fit for only because she was a female. She's responsible for a revision of 381.12. She was very instrumental in our most recent version of 381.20. So when I look at her career, Desert Storm, she did PSIs. She was in Berlin when there was an East Germany and a West Germany. She has done terrorist threat assessment. She's done physical searches, surveillance, debriefing, subject interviews, foreign intelligence and terrorist threat assessment. She's done so many things, even with critical technology transfer cases when she was working with the U.S. Customs Service. And those are just a few of the things that she's done in her career. And she retired in 2019. As I say, I was honored with being able to narrate her retirement ceremony in the Women's History Corridor of the Pentagon. And I just think she's a phenomenal woman. We didn't always agree. When we talked about training, there were things that she and I had disagreements on, but in a lot of instances, we had some very deep discussions on what 381.20 needed to say or should say when it came to training. And I respect her phenomenally.
Huge shout out, Traci. And you know what? I have to say, professionals can disagree. It's okay to have a disagreement with somebody. That's part of being a professional. But huge shout out to Linda Matthews.
Yeah, thank you.
Is she in the Hall of Fame yet? When's that going to happen? That's like a second call to action.
She is not.
Huh?
She is not.
All right. So
right
now we have to rescue Daniel Bissell, restore him to his glory, and get Linda Matthews in the MI Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Yes.
I agree. Yep.
Hey, Mike, over to you, sir.
All right, thanks. So, as I look back, and as everybody's already said several times, I like to be a fan of history. And I thought about it, what avenue I want to take with this, counterintelligence story. And it was something, somebody I worked with, one of my mentors. I think about all the folks that came before us that I had the opportunity to interact with, right? That brought me on and just imparted their knowledge on me, and 99% of them stories we can never talk about, right? That's the unfortunate part, is that is where the real history is that has never been documented, and it's just a shame is that those folks pass on and move. Their stories of things that they did for Army counterintelligence are just absolutely amazing, and I think today's audience would be very floored can't even comprehend some of the things. We did what? And so that, to me, it's a call to action. We've been working with some of the alumni. So how do we get these stories told, right? Whether it's through the Hall of Fame or whatever. I think outside of that, I know Jeremy, you guys have talked about it. I've heard it talked about. Dave Acosta talked about it in his. You go back to World War II, right? And you're reading the double cross, what that was, and think about in a World War, what MI5 did against the Germans. And so it's like, it reads so well, right? I always just kind of smile, like, really, they did that, and ballsy. That's the word I'm going to use, right? It's like, these are things that for God and country, like, this is what we're doing. And they had their processes and procedures set up to do all that. And I'm thinking, wow, could anything like that happen again today? And probably not to that scope. Operation Mincemeat being a similar thing. Some of the things that was just the sign of the times back then, in order to make the enemy do, think, see, as we like to say, and influence those decision makers. I don't know that there'd be necessarily be a similar appetite today to do some of that stuff, but it's just I just find it very rewarding to know that at a time in history, that's what it took, and individuals stepped up and said, "This is what we're going to do to make it happen." Hell be damned. And we look back on it 70 years later. It's like, wow, that was pretty impressive. And how can we take from that and learn from that? And again, it's we say this too. It's like it's maybe new to you. It's old to some of us, right? Some of this we've seen before. It's just we've been polished off and put a new title on it. But for me, reading those stories and how that, and I'm a big nonfiction guy, so reading that and seeing, wow, that was just amazing. So that's kind of my answer for that.
I love it. Empowered and engaged for sure, as they were manipulating the German intelligence service for sure. Glenn, I'm going to pass you the baton to go ahead and close us out here.
Yeah, so thanks. And I'm glad I went last on this because I'm the least history buff around. I love history in the sense that it teaches me things. And then my challenge becomes, Shawn says I drink too much, so I burn those cells. But my challenge becomes retaining it. No, seriously, thing I love about this question and the direction I'm going on this question ties back to, what everyone has said in the sense of history teaches us lessons, right? And so when I look back at some of the ones cited and others like Spies Among Us, but, really I look back at like the writings of the OSS, right? And I look at a time that was far less modernized than we have today, with all the innovation and capability we have today, they were able to accomplish and defeat the enemy, right? And acquire and defeat the enemy. So going back to when I first came in the CI and I was sitting in the CI course, and again, they were throwing these additional anecdotes around and giving us reading lists and things like that. So the beginning of starting to read about the OSS and those accomplishments, I learned something that took me throughout my entire career, and I say it still today. I learned you could take me and drop me in the middle of nowhere, and I could do counterintelligence. And it goes back to the old days of World War II, and you look at the OSS and what they were doing. Didn't have all the technology we have today, et cetera, but they were extremely effective. And those TTPs, yeah, they've changed because they've been modernized, as Shawn loves to say, and I agree, modernize or die, right? So they have changed because they have to change in terms of modernizing, but their fundamentals haven't changed. And I learned that out of sci-psych, right? Like that history taught me that, hey, to the question earlier about innovation and hardships, hey, you're in a new environment. Your job is to do counterintelligence in this environment. Okay, if I know counterintelligence, it's just a matter of how do I apply it in the environment I'm in. Simple example. Am I in uniform or civilian clothes? Am I in relaxed grooming standards or not, right? Like, it doesn't matter. It just, how am I going to apply my craft? Do I require a sense of discretion or not? Do I require deeper levels of, identity or not, right? So those types of things. But historically, that is something I've always tried to share with everyone is like, look, you can look as deep in history as you choose, and you will see that we have always done these operations. And we've been very effective at them. Now, yes, when you look at, the enemy, right, the foreign adversary, they have advanced in some cases, right? They're stealing all our technology so they can compete to try to keep up, right? So they've advanced in ways, and they've advanced in their TTPs because what? They stole our TTPs. And so I would say to the audience and those asking these types of questions is that history teaches us lessons. History tends to repeat itself. And so because of that, pay very close attention to history. There are tons of reading lists out there, and reading is always good for the soul. And so take a look and then look at today, how can you apply those TTPs, or how are you applying them today, and have you modernized them so that you stay current and we stay ahead, right? That's our challenge right now, is staying ahead, because theft is happening at the thought of the idea, right? Vice implementation. So that's my thought process on that. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Glenn. From the Trojan horse to the most current operation, things evolve. When I look back in the day, from stenography to the little micro cameras, through payphones, all the way up through pagers to cell phones to a UTS environment, we need to know our history of where we came from. Bricks and sticks, tried and true, works the fundamentals of counterintelligence. Thank you, gentlemen. Scott, over to you for the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the fundamentals are the same, but man, the environment's so fast these days. I think speed, is the thing that we got to worry about now. How can we do the same thing that we used to do faster and better, than our adversaries? Cool. So, all right, this next question is going to, talk a little bit about, collection, right? So, the order for this question is going to be Traci, then Glenn, then Shawn, then Mike. And so, from your experience, why does CI collection and collection management matter, so much? And where do organizations most often get it wrong? Traci, you're on mute.
So, apologize for that. I think I'll start with the second part of that question. Where do we most get it wrong? I think the reason we most get it wrong is because we don't give it enough attention. We do not take it seriously. We do not see it as a crucial part of our mission. And for me, I think collection and collection management are very important from a CI perspective. And I had the blessing of being a collection manager, which is something that a lot of CI agents don't have an opportunity to do. Most don't get an opportunity to do. I did it in the 650th. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. And this is about talent management. I was supposed to go over there and work in the AKICA with regards to like their version of the SCO, the sub-control office at the time. But I ended up being the collection manager. And what I learned from that is the importance of CI agents understanding collection requirements and knowing when they go to those liaison functions, when they're meeting with an individual that has information, when they're conducting an investigation, are there collection requirements within those missions and others that is reportable to the intelligence community, because it's a gap, or it's reinforcing something that is already in the intel community that needs to be reinforced or validated. And I also realized that I did not learn what a collection requirement was until I went to, yes, Shawn, I'm going to say it, DSDC. I went to DSDC understanding that as a CI agent, there were things that in that course that were useful to me. And I got it on it was a fluke. Someone fell out at the last minute. I found out on Friday. I had to be on a plane Sunday. And, but I learned what collection requirements actually were. And I learned that it was important to know what they were in order to conduct my mission and come back and provide information to the intelligence community writ large about what was important. So that was my first introduction, which surprised me because I didn't learn it in the CI Special Agent course as part of my foundational training. And then when I became a collection manager, I realized that CI agents didn't really understand, yes, you need to write a report about this. Yes, this is relevant to the rest of the intel community. It's not just important to us. And I also learned that as an ops officer when I was in Afghanistan, that those reports are crucial to providing information, especially in a deployed environment, that helps commanders make prudent, wise, life-saving or life-destroying, for the adversary decisions. So I realized that CI agents, one, didn't know what the collection requirements were, that I was going to have to instill upon them what they needed to report on and how they could direct their missions to better affect that information. And so it was a very interesting assignment. I realized that CI agents want to do the right thing. They do. And when they know what the right thing is in 9 times out of 10 or 99.9% of the time, that's what they do. They just needed to know that someone cared about what they were doing and that they could do a quality report that answered a requirement. One of the things that I noticed is that on the analytical side of this, there were analysts who did not know what evaluations were, because I would often see our information in assessments, analytical assessments by DIA, you name it. And as a collection manager, I would call them because they always had their byline on there. And I would not see an evaluation. And so I would call them and I'd tell them, hey, I just saw this report. You referenced some information from a report that one of my agents did, but I don't see a requirement. They didn't even know what an evaluation was. So I had to educate them a little bit on that. But being proactive with regards to collection management means that you know what the requirements are, you know where to find them, because they aren't always listed under CI collection requirements. You have to look at the terrorist organizational stuff. You have to look in security. You have to look in technology. You have to look in a lot of places. And then you need to direct your agents and let them know when they are going out and they're doing these liaisons or whatever it is that they're doing as their mission. These are the requirements. And if you come across this information, your spidey senses need to go off and your ears need to start tingling. And you need to start writing that down and bringing it back and writing a report. So I say that because I do not see collection management as a permanent or a part of organizational structure within CI organizations. I just don't. And if we're going to get it right, we have to at least acknowledge that it's something that we need to do. I mean, I could go on, but I'm not. I think for now, that's all I'm going to say, and I'll let everybody else chime in.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, nothing will make a CI agent go out and collect and write more than getting some feedback in the form of like evals and whatnot. You know, suddenly they'll bow up a little bit. They'll start banging on the keyboard harder, you know, so absolutely 100%. So
I used to always tell my bosses when they didn't think that it was important to provide that feedback, and the analysts, they need to know that they are doing a good job. And they also need to know when they're not and how they can do a better job. And now I'll shut up. I'll be quiet for now.
Right on. All right. No, that was excellent. I appreciate it. All right, Glenn, next up.
Yeah, so she'll be quiet. She'll hand it to the guy that everybody accuses of not being quiet. Okay. All right. Here we go. So yeah, no, I love the fact that, and I'm sure somebody got some intel behind it, but I love that you put Traci first on this, because at the end of the day, she's the only person I know on the audience here that's been a collection manager a couple of times, as she stated, and I knew she was gonna do just what she does, right? As Shawn said earlier, we're all built different, and that's a good thing. That is a good thing. So imagine us all being robots and built the same way, or maybe even a singular doggone specified piece of the career field. Oh, I'm sorry. I digress. All right. So anyway, no, seriously, here's where these unfortunates that we think sometimes are unfortunate in our career are actually blessings, right? So again, I said earlier, I spent the first half of my career out in the tactical world, and doing the, as folks call it, the tactical CI mission, right? Air quotes. But you know, it taught me about collection management, because we have this thing that, as Traci mentioned, we don't teach it in the basic course. We don't teach it in PODC, right? Whatever we call that nowadays, ALC, whatever we're calling it, BLC, whatever they're calling it now, right? We don't teach it there, right? Which means that soldiers, specifically CI agents, are not learning about collection management earlier enough. It's not a foundational educational or training requirement. But when you go to tactical world and you get in a division, you get in a corps, you will quickly learn about this thing called the ACE, the analytical control element. So let's flash forward. NCSC 2035, I just made that up. NCSC 2035 needs to have something that looks like an ACE. And it doesn't need to be called an ACE, it just needs to be collection management. And why is that? This is what I learned early out there in the tactical world, watching the ACE and watching the G2 updates to the commander, right? The G2 update to the division commander or the corps commander, fighting what the Army is designed to do, fighting wars, right? Or training to fight wars. That's where I realized, like, look at it from a commander's perspective. The commander needs to be able to see the entirety of the battlefield, 360-degree optic over the battlefield. From a red standpoint, that means every nook and cranny of capability that they have. From a blue standpoint, it means every nook and capability that I have to go against and defeat them. When we don't do collection management, we do not see that. What, to the second part of the question, what's most often left out, or however it said it? Counterintelligence. Counterintelligence. You know why? Traci hit on it. Two sides of that. Because CI people aren't trained on it. They don't have an appreciation and understanding of it. So they're not advocating for it. And we all hit on it earlier. Commanders and senior leaders outside of the counterintelligence profession don't understand the capability of counterintelligence. So they're leaving it out of their 360 look. From an NCSC 2035 perspective, it will allow NCSC to understand every capability of counterintelligence they have under their authority, no matter where it sits, no matter if it's called MICTAF CI HUMIT, right? They will know that I have X amount of MICTAF trained personnel who are trained and certified to conduct CI. Oh, they are best known for their collections. So guess what? If I have collection requirements and I have a lot, I'm gonna tag a bunch of those guys, right? And then over here, I have these other guys that are specialized, trained to do TSCM. So a collection manager knows where all of their capabilities are at and who all the players are and what specialties they bring to the table. So that is why it's so critically important. But as Traci stated, it's often overlooked, especially outside of the tactical arena. The Army is built and designed to do what? Go fight and win wars. So if you don't identify yourself as a teammate or team member who has a capability to go fight and win a war, you will probably get left out. It's very simple, but we just don't do it justice in education and training. So young agents, you need to learn all about it, and then you need to proliferate it, advocate for it, etc. So that's really where I wanted to go with this. I came up with the NCSC 2035 thing as Traci was talking, because NCSC may not even think about it. I know for a fact, for all of the former 902nds here, I know when ACI stood up, they went in there rightfully so, and they refocused that entire analytical capability to do what? Enable investigations and operations. There you go. Take that ACE analytical element, make it a collection management element designed to enable your activities, investigation, operations, activities, collections, whatever, right? So it is very important, but often overlooked. And we often just leave the CI out. And it also provides one of the other things I talk about all the time, which is and it's part of the Commander's 360, right? It's an enterprise view, right? So it's not just about what capabilities my organization has, it's everyone in the battle space, right? Like when we were all down range, right? That commander needs to know everyone in the battle space and what capabilities they present. So that's part of the collection management plan. Thank you. Over.
Awesome, man. You're just coining new terms all day long, right? So that's fantastic. All right, let's go ahead and move on to Shawn. You're next in the queue.
Glenn had me at fight and win our nation's wars. Totally had me ready to go. Glenn had me at fight and win our nation's wars. Hey, this one will be easy for me. You know, because I didn't have the opportunities to do collection management like Traci did. I had the opportunities to interact with our team when we were forward. You know, Jeremy and I had that really good, robust experience when we were in Iraq. And I tell you, I probably had the opportunity to do more conducting of the collections in that environment than any other place in my career, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So I'm a huge, and I fully agree with Traci. Like we kind of leave that behind, right? We don't think about it unless we're forward and downrange, but you're not practicing it in different environments and getting ready and building up towards all those good things. But I see it as you know, an equal to all other functions that certainly of CI that needs attention. I believe CI collection should help inform other CI functions. It's one of its roles. I think standing alone CI collection, like everything in CI, should be used for effects against the adversary or the bad man. And I think it's critical in allowing commanders in the enterprise to understand, you know, the fee operating environment. I think it's absolutely necessary. The management of it matters so that our folks just don't go off azimuth, right? There's not a lot of CI folks. We're low density, and they got to be focused on what matters the most for us. So that's why I think collection management matters. That's really all I have on the topic, other than I know it's an extremely valid tool because I've seen it work in action in combat environments. As a matter of fact, I'll give a quick story. I watched an E5. I won't mention his name. He's a sergeant major now, but I watched him run an operation in Baghdad that caused a BCT commander at the 05 level during the surge to drive from the southern part of Baghdad to the green zone to give this E5 a coin and say, because of your operation, I've had no combat related deaths for 45 days. So I don't know how to say anything more than that was a collection activity. And there's nothing more impactful than that, right? 45 days, height of the surge, no combat related deaths because of one collection activity that an E5 in the United States Army conceived, managed, ran, and executed himself. So big fan. Over.
That is a winner right there. I hope he still has that coin, because that one has more meaning than most for sure. All right, Mike, anchor us.
Yeah. So I, like everybody else, you know, none of us, I didn't have the same experience like Traci to work in an ACE, and I've taken a different approach, and she may have hit on it a little bit, but I was really want to amplify it. So I look at it this way: Traci is a, you know, outstanding just as a warrant officer, right? She gets put into an assignment in a position that is outside her normal, I wouldn't say comfort zone, but it's not what she's designed to do, right? But the commander says, I need you to do this. And she's, as a warrant officer, said, Roger that, that's what I'm going to do. So she sinks her teeth in to become, using her past experiences into being a collection manager. Having not worked in an ACE before, I don't know that, and they're all structured a little differently, but I don't believe there's any authorized billet MOS for a 35 Lima, 351 Lima in an ACE. There may be, but it's a singleton, right? But we always think, when we think of analysis, we think of the 35 Foxes, right? The 350 Foxes. That's what comes to mind when we say analysis. That's somebody else. But we tend to forget that analysis drives intelligence, which drives counterintelligence, right? And we all benefited from having analysts help us do our investigations and operations. And so I think the benefit that Traci's experiences is that as a CI professional and a CI warrant officer, she knew what was needed out there in the field from a counterintelligence perspective, and was able to see that, recognize it, and then direct and help manage that. Whereas if she wasn't there, somebody would have said, oh, maybe there's a CI thing that we could do. Maybe a human, warrant officer would have maybe thrown a bone that way, but it probably would not have gotten the attention that it needed. And so your benefit of having you in that role, I think, was that you had kind of a lookout for counterintelligence opportunities. Just like if it was a SIGINT warrant officer sitting there, it's a human warrant officer. You're naturally inclined, I think, to look for those type of things first. And so that gives you a totally unique experience. And I don't know who else in the career field has that experience like you, but I think it was invaluable. And I agree with everybody else, is that it's kind of a missing piece to us, right? As CI transformation comes and CI command is doing the same thing with the DI. It's like, how do we empower? How do we enable? How do we use collection management to get after what we're doing from a CI perspective? Otherwise, we can't just be doing counterintelligence for doing counterintelligence, right? Especially when we go back to the stovepipes. I'm doing ops, I'm doing investigations, I'm doing tech just for the sake of doing it. If there's nothing else above that that's helping inform and shape that, then that's what we've been doing for years. And that's just I don't think that's a sustainable thing going in the future. So I think it's just the benefit of that. It can't be done. Counterintelligence can't be done in a vacuum. It should not be. And I think that this is, as Jeremy and crew look at, down the road, and enablers to what helps counterintelligence. Analysis is one of them, and having somebody that having the collection management perspective inform and shape counterintelligence operations, investigations. I just think it totally makes sense. I just hope that the system and process will actually think about that outside of this podcast and say, how do we do that? How do we actually get there? If we're not doing it, how do we do it? Not only at the tactical level, but also at the strategic operational level as well. That's my thought.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, quite frankly, we're a requirements-driven specialty, right? We are providing decision advantage to commanders, so they can go and fight and win wars, is what it boils down to, right? So it's decision advantage for commanders. We got to have the requirements. Those priority, requirements are levied. The collection manager collects them all up and puts them out there and manages it so that we are aimed in the right direction to get the information we need. And that's through collection activities that we do. But that can come from investigations and operations. We got to know what those things inform as well. We might have to, modify a little bit about how we put those things together to, protect how we're putting it out there. But, all of our different, CI functions are conducting activities that can collect information of value and answer requirements that are going to help commanders get that decision advantage. So absolutely outstanding. I appreciate what everybody has talked about here. Let's kick it over to Jeremy to move on to the next question.
I got a quick alibi.
Oh, whoa.
It will be quick.
Fire away.
It will be quick. I thought about it when Shawn was talking, and then Mike hit it, right? And he talked about, having a CI person, in this case, Traci, up there to look out for CI equities, right? Yeah, that was the point I missed. Collection managers, specifically CI collection managers, but all collection managers protect equities, right? So again, it's about capability, right? Like, how do I defeat the bad guy? So you're either in the game and you're a valued partner, or you're not. And when you're not, you get cut, or you whatever, right? You lose resources, like we've been talking about. So it creates efficiencies, and it is a resource, should be of value to the command. My quick highlight of a story behind it. So there's a retired 4-star general, and I had to look to make sure he was still with us. Thank God he is. Looks like he's 80 years old. His name is General, you all will remember him, General Tommy Franks, right? General Tommy Franks. So I had the pleasure of being in the 2nd Infantry Division when Tommy Franks was a division commander. I had the scary pleasure of watching the G2 of 2nd Infantry Division, who is now a retired SES, that many know. I can't think of his name right now, so I obviously won't call it. Retired Army Colonel and then SES, over in Europe for a long time. And I think he retired from there. But anyway, I watched Tommy Franks obliterate him as the G2. And I forever remember this quote from Tommy Franks, 2-star general at the time, looked at the G2 and said, You have billions of dollars of junk in the sky, but you can't tell me X, Y, Z. So, and I was sitting there as a young W1 warrant officer then, when he was like, Tommy Franks would light you up, his primary staff officers, if they were slipping in a meeting, whatever, because Tommy Franks didn't sleep, right? So I just want you all to take that away. If you have billions of dollars of junk in the sky, we all know that he's implying, right? So think about that. If you know about counterintelligence and human as a capability, we're not in the sky, we're on the ground. We have sensors. So boom, if I'm of value to you, then you're like, where are my CI guys at, right? That junk in the sky, because and the reason why the junk in the sky wasn't working was because of weather. It was weather that was preventing the junk in the sky from collecting. So I just throw that out there. It is, to me, a great story to wrap up the collection management discussion, because we had billions of dollars of junk in the sky, but we didn't have CI on the ground or collecting. Thank you.
Effing clouds, man. All right, Jeremy.
I appreciate it. Fantastic. So you're all technical and tactical leaders with decades of experience. If you had 5 minutes with the president tomorrow to reshape U.S. counterintelligence, what would your top priority be and why? Traci, Glenn, Mike. Traci, over to you. Or I'm sorry, Traci, Glenn, Mike, Shawn. Excuse me, Traci.
Well, I think one thing that I have a couple. One thing I would say is that diversity is not our enemy, because we as CI agents, all of us can't go into every part of the world and blend in. And I think it's important to capitalize on the strengths that we all have, and recognize the weaknesses that we all have in our inability to go into certain areas and our strengths to go into others, and that everybody has a part of that. The other thing I would emphasize is training. We need to own our training, and we need to own our talent management. To me, those are crucial to our future success as we move towards, as Glenn said, NCSC 2035. I agree with that. And I will say that I think collection management, and we just sang the song, but collection management and its partner analysis are key. CI analysis, CI collection management are key to our success. So that's basically all I have. Those three things. I know you said one, but I have three. So
All great. Traci, I hope you meet President Trump tomorrow and lobby for all those things, please.
We'll see.
Glenn, over to you, my friend.
Oh, I didn't realize I was next. All right. Yes. All right. So, here's where I'm at. I think number one, right? So first thing I would do is I would have a threat-driven placemat. And so we all know every good G2 has a threat-driven placemat. And I know he's getting briefed on that threat-driven placemat every day by various folks from various agencies, right? But these are my 5 minutes. I would have a threat-driven placemat, probably designed by some of the best out there, which is not me, right? That graphically depicts, and I would choose China, right? That graphically depicts in 5D, AI, machine learning 5D, right? Almost standing off the paper, like threat-driven placemat. That's the visual. My number one discussion would be, Mr. President, you need to appoint today and write an executive order, your staff, today, the NCSC stand up that we've all been talking about today. Because with my placemat and that one request, everything, and now if I had 2 more minutes left, I'd talk about, and it must be fully funded resource, blah, blah, blah. But here's why I'm not so worried about that. The placemat is there to give him the visual of what everyone is trying to tell him how they're eating our lunch. The one person appointed today, executive order giving all the funding, resourcing, and federal resourcing, right, needed. If you do that, that person and the team they build would do everything else. I would talk to that person, and because I had the 5 minutes with the president that got the executive order, tells me I would be a principal advisor to that appointee. And from there, I would tell them all the things that Traci just talked about, right? I would tell that appointee, you can't do it alone. You never go in by yourself. You need diversity. You need everyone's capability. You need network and collaborate, blah, 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 right? So that's it. That's what I would do. Thank you.
Yeah, Glenn, I love it. You know what? You mentioned executive order, and I've tossed this around in my head so much here the past couple months. We see the Secure Act just didn't gain enough traction to get out of committee because of the turf war. It was awful. Executive orders, though, time now. Time, make it happen. Let's affect change. Let's go kick the adversary in the teeth because the homeland is no longer a sanctuary. Glenn, I want you there tomorrow, please. Can we call up anybody we know that knows President Trump to get you for NCSC? Not 2035, 2030 now. All right, Mike, over to you.
I'm there.
Thank you. That's going to be difficult to follow there, but I support Glenn moving up to the NCSC and being our next leader up there. So, if I had my 5 minutes, I wrote down the same thing: is develop a process or a product, that would help the most senior leader of our nation help better understand whatever that threat is, and it's whatever we're facing threat, whatever that is. But more importantly, I would stress that the president should use counterintelligence to protect U.S. equities, whatever that is. It's people's, it's soldiers, it's the equipment, right? Because that's what we're designed to do. I don't know that there's a great understanding of that, and again, it's just understanding why we're here and what counterintelligence offers and can be done. I think the executive order is a way to do that because, again, control what you can control, right? And that can be done. It's getting, for us, it's quit talking about it. We know it needs to be done. For them, it's like, hey, you need to talk about this. This needs to be done, and make them understand it, and understand legislation and bureaucracy and all that. That it takes a while, but there are certain things that the chief executive officer of the United States can do in the president's role, and then getting people on board with that, whether through Congress, through committee, to say, hey, this is what we're going to do, and recognizing that the threats are there. We have the folks, we have the means to identify and help protect it. It needs to be better managed and do something now about it before it's too late, because kicking it and keep talking about it is just prolonging a problem. And the next thing you know, then we're in conflict and we're going to be worrying about something else. And the CI thing is just going to fall off the side. That's the problem. That's what I fear. So engage, do it while you can. And you're not going to please everybody, but you know what? You're the president. Let's make it happen and get it started. At least get the discussion going.
Yeah, Mike, I appreciate that. You know how we gain consensus when the power grids gets corrupted and counterintelligence just didn't have enough people to go ahead and prevent that from happening. And I think there's something to be said, Mike, to echo what you talked about with the critical infrastructure. Shawn, please.
I think the first thing I'd do is I'd start by making sure Glenn would tell the president, unlike this shirt, counterintelligence is not hyphenated. So make sure we get it right in the executive order. Counterintelligence, cool shirt, not hyphenated. So I think I'd lead off with this. I'd probably say something like, Mr. President, counterintelligence should be great, really tremendous. We should be the best at it by far. Right now, it's really good. It's not terrible. It could be much better. CI should be winning. We like winning. Winning matters. And right now, we're not winning enough. We have the best CI professionals, great people like Jeremy Clark at IXN, tough, smart. They know what they're doing, but we're not organized to win, and we need to let them win, and that's a problem. It's a terrible Trump impersonation. That's how I tell them.
Oh my God, Shawn, that was amazing. I love it. Spot on. You're using his language. Go ahead,
We
Glenn.
need to make CI great again, man.
That's right. Make CI great again.
I love it. I think the CI does need to be great again. It's been left out in the cold. It's time to come back in. Go ahead, Traci.
No, I just think that what everybody said was great. Shawn, I loved your impression. It was amazing.
Thank you guys for walking through that, and I'm hopeful that, really honestly, this gets to somebody with political influence and they recognize, you know what we're talking about matters, and we need to do something before an event happens. And thank you, Scott. Back over to you, sir.
All right, we're starting to, really get close to the end here. So this one's going to come from Jeff in Germany. It's very, very specific, right? So clearly, he's calling a couple of you guys out, Glenn and Shawn, but specifically with a Glenn story. So I guess you're going to have to respond to this. So basically, there was a time when Glenn went to the warrant officer senior staff course, and a senior cadre member presented him with a picture of Glenn and Jeff, seeking an autograph, and evidently that's something right there. So there's some other Jeff stories about you two that are floating around out there. So what do you have to say about that?
I defer to Shawn. He's got his mic unmuted.
I'll tell you this. Leave it to Jeff to razz the dudes with the microphone. Leave it to Glenn. Should we start telling stories about decorating his office post deployment? Should we? Or I love you, brother. Jeff, I love you. My name is Jeff. I love you, Jeff.
Well, I will respond since Jeff sent the one scenario. I'll just be blatantly honest and say I don't remember the cadre member. Jeff obviously does. I do remember the picture. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But as Shawn said, when I saw that, I thought only Jeff would remember something like that, because Jeff remembers the oddest crap that you tried to forget. So, and the last thing I'll say is, Jeff, make sure you let Claudia know we said hello.
All right. Well covered, gentlemen. All right, Jeremy, you're bringing us home here.
All right. Well, Mike, we're not going to let you off easy. So, there's a lot of stories out there, Mike, and we're going to give a shout out to Molly. She had one she was going to ask. It really comes down to, I've known you for a long time. I know you traveled to Germany, and you always have fantastic German beer, like legit German beer in good old Annapolis. And Mike, how do you smuggle back a case of beer? Tell us your secret, man.
So, first of all, it's not smuggling, right? It is brought back legally. So, I'm
declared. I've watched him do it.
That's right. I mean, you may have participated, because I think we did a room wrapping at one time. So, I pride myself on the fact that, I love, American beer is good. If it's not, Yingling's the closest thing, but German beer is the best. And bringing it back, having a good, nice, cold Augusteller, brewer is a good one to have in the summer when you've been outside. But, for initially, you bring back 2 or 3 beers in your suitcase. Okay, that's fine. Well, I figured out quickly that, a rack of beer, and for those that have not been to Germany, beer comes in half-liter glass bottles, 20 bottles to a rack. That's 10 liters of beer. It sounds a lot more when you do it that way, but it's really not that much. But fully wrapped, you can bring that back as a piece of check luggage, and it weighs like 32 pounds. So I just developed a technique where every time I'd go to Germany, I would, go to the local PX or whatever store, and I'd buy some bubble wrap and some paper towels and some tape, and find an empty cardboard box and wrap all the necks in and put the bottles in some bubble wrap and shove them down the rack. They're not going anywhere. And then you just wrap it up in cardboard, and then you tape it up and you write your name and your flight number on it. And I've done that every time I've come back from Germany. So that's probably about 15 or so racks of beer. And I still have like 7 down in the refrigerator now. So it's I figured I'm not going to just bother myself with bringing 2 bottles of beer back. In fact, I could bring wine back instead in the suitcase. And it's never been an issue because it's legal. It's not smuggling. And when I've gone through customs, they say, "What's in there?" I said, "It's a rack of beer," and it just rolls down the conveyor belt, and they just keep on going. So I actually have pictures, and I made a little video, and I think Shawn may have helped me at one point. As Shawn, Teresa, and Pam and I did one in Frankfurt one night. We wrapped it all up, and everybody, brought home a rack of beer. So.
And I do believe that the Customs and Border Patrol folks are pretty laudatory. They're like, "That's a rack of beer," and you're like, "It sure is," and they're like, "Well done, sir. Bravo, bravo."
No problem at all. Thanks, Molly, for the question.
When I first found out about this, I invested in 3M because they are the makers of bubble wrap, and I've been cleaning up, ever since.
Well, all I kept hearing was 99 bottles of beer on the wall. That just, I don't know, it just got stuck in my head.
Yep. Great question.
Great question. And for our audience out there, if you want a video of how Mike actually makes that happen, we have one, and I'm sure if you reach out to Mike Dye, he'll send it over to you. Hey, so I truly appreciate all the questions out there to our audience, and you guys taking the time. I have one more question. And so for this one, I know we gave you guys all the questions beforehand, just with the audience to make sure we're prepared and we're succinct, and we're coming up on, I don't know, like hour 7. So here it is. All of you are retired now CW5s of the counterintelligence profession. What does it mean to be a counterintelligence warrant officer? Mike, I'm going to pass you the baton first.
All right. What does it mean to be? That's a great question. And I'm glad we get to kind of wrap up with that. So to me, being a counterintelligence warrant officer is a couple things. One is being, a learning counterintelligence professional. I want to do everything I can to learn all about my craft as I started as a W1 up to W5, realizing that I'll never know it all. Knowing that I have a network of other warrant officers, civilians, NCOs officers out there that are going to provide me guidance, teach me, train me, give me things that I didn't know before, knowing when and how to leverage that. I think as a warrant officer in general, it's all about the network, right? None of us do it alone, whether you're counterintelligence or you're some other discipline. The network is there to be able to know that who you can reach out to and how you leverage that. And don't be afraid to do that. I think in counterintelligence, we can be pretty niched. We have plenty of folks who know our specific roles, leverage that, right? So I think we owe it to ourselves, as even before we're retired, to train, mentor, lead, develop those younger warrant officers. And I think that is a staple of any warrant officer in general. You mentioned that before. Yep, I'm the president of the Army Warrant Officers Association. That's one of my mantras, is what are we doing to bring up and train, mentor, lead the next generation of these W1s and W2s, regardless of what your MOS is. And I think that's an incumbent responsibility of all warrant officers. And I think it carries on once you retire. And I ask that, my peers, those retirees that I deal with, to share that information back. Just because we've retired doesn't mean we don't have those things that we can't share. Deliver them in a way that it's going to be interesting and helpful to the next generation of warrant officers. But to me, that outside of just counterintelligence, that's what it means to be a warrant officer. Be present, know the difference, between being present and having presence, advise, and train, mentor, lead the next young group of NCOs, soldiers, and warrant officers as we go through.
Oh, great. Well said, Mike. Thank you. And Traci, over to you, please.
I've had a unique experience, and I think they're not. I mean, I chose Linda because she was one of 11 female warrant officers when she came into the business. And when you talk about CI, you talk about even a smaller percentage of females being CI warrant officers. I consider it a blessing to have made it to CW5. I've had some great mentors and some great leaders and people that I aspired to be they male, female, black, white, purple, green, whatever. I was blessed to know the 3 gentlemen on this panel from when I was in E4, E5, and we have come up in the ranks from over all of those years, and I respect them tremendously, as well as the both of you, and giving us this opportunity. But being a CI warrant officer to me has meant lifelong learning and being able to answer questions, and even when I didn't know the answer, trying to get the answer. And being able to reach out to people, even though I would try to find the answer in policy or read about it, also reaching out to my colleagues to find those answers. I learned that as an NCO, and it was amplified when I became a warrant officer. Being a CI warrant officer also means being a mentor, sometimes when you don't even realize it, because you are setting an example in everything you say, everything you do, and every act that you make. It means mentoring not only junior, contemporary, and senior warrant officers, but also enlisted personnel and officers. And that does not end when you retire. It is a privilege to do. I see being a CI warrant officer, knowing policy, and if not knowing it, reading it, finding out about it, and knowing it for yourself. And as Mike said, the network is amazing. Being able to reach out to people when you need something, whether it's professional or personal, and being there when things happen. Knowing your craft is part of it, grooming people to replace you, or at least attempting to, and understanding when personal things prevent them from being able to do so, and giving people grace when they have meant well, but maybe fallen short, because Lord knows I've done that, and I got grace. And I could go on, but I do appreciate the fact that someone saw in me when I didn't see in myself that I should become a warrant officer. And being a warrant officer also means looking at those young soldiers and seeing that talent and seeing that potential and working with them and helping them to become what they want to be. And once they become that, continuing to work with them. So for me, being a CI warrant officer means all of that and a lot more, but I will close it out right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Traci. I'm going to pass it over to Shawn.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Jeremy. I'm going to appropriate the Navy saying of being a warrant officer means being a global force for good, right? We have a network that is rooted in our history, in the Warrant Officer Rising Eagle, in the Warrant Officer Brown Colors, where you were a warrant officer first, and if any other warrant officer in the Army asked you to do something, you did it, right? And we're this global network of professionals that just help each other and get stuff done. I got to finish out on a combatant command my last tour. It was absolutely phenomenal experience. And how we are trusted by senior leaders to influence them and help influence the command and help them lead is absolutely phenomenal. And it's something that can't be taken lightly, right? So they count on us to do things that the other rank structures can't really do because it just doesn't fit in the box the right way. So you have a lot of power to really influence senior folks. The more senior you get, the more influential you get if you keep your reputation intact and people trust you. So I really believe that the part of being in the warrant officer cohort, you're just a global force for good. That's what it means. You can get stuff done that other people, when they're stuck in their stovepipes, can't get done. They should be turning to you to solve that problem. Over.
I love it, Shawn. Thank you. And Glenn.
I'll start with a single word with an exclamation point. Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's what it means to me to be a senior, to be a CI warrant officer. Simply wow. The first couple of things I jotted down here was it's everything. It's freaking everything, man. It's everything. You should eat, sleep, and drink counterintelligence, right? That's it. I mean, you should be dreaming about it at night. And oh, by the way, for all those out there that know about PTSD, I actually still dream about work, believe it or not. Live conversations going on. So I'm still solving the world's problems, just so you know, right? Nobody else knows, but I'm solving them. But no, I'm serious about that in the sense that we've been talking about it, the passion. I think there's, one thing no one ever accused me of as a CI warrant officer was they never accused me of not having a passion for the craft and the business. And I'm not bragging. I'm just stating the fact. God gave me a gift. Some people call it the gift of gab. When I would go and speak at places, even when I was a young warrant officer, seniors would come up to me after the fight and say, even when I was a W1, they would say, "Chief, holy crap, you know your stuff," right? Holy crap, I didn't know that. Thank you for that. Hey, Chief, I need you on my team. Hey, Chief, let me get your contact information. I'm not saying that to brag, and I'm not saying that for me. I'm saying that for the young warrant officer or the young NCO out there, more importantly, who's looking to become a warrant officer, that you understand that's where you should be. Not mean that you shouldn't be me. You should just be in a place of relevance to your organization. As folks have said earlier, everyone should, and they do, look up to the warrant officer, right? They look to you for your expertise. They look to you for advice and counsel. And Shawn said, they look to you for some things that just don't fit in the other two boxes. But they figure, let me go talk to Chief. If he doesn't do it or he doesn't know, he'll tell me who to go to, right? So I mean it when I say the passion. Eat, drink, and sleep counterintelligence. It is everything. Take it on. Take it on, right? If you're a CI warrant officer, know your craft and take it on. I mentioned earlier about being dropped in assignments and having to basically re-educate, re-inform, and establish counterintelligence in that tactical world, assignment after assignment. It was one of the things that I just got frustrated with, and I finally got over to INSCOM, right? I was tired of having to explain in the tactical realm what is counterintelligence and how should we be applied, vice some of the stuff they thought we should be doing, right? And we know that a lot of that still goes on out there in the tactical world today. So it's an ongoing battle. Folks hit on it earlier. You have to be an ambassador for counterintelligence and the warrant officer cohort, right? Affectionately known as the warrant officer corps to me and all these retired CW5s, right? You must be an ambassador for being a warrant officer, which means being a United States Army soldier and an officer, right? You got to be an ambassador, and you got to be an ambassador for counterintelligence. If you're doing those things on a daily basis, you're winning every day. You're winning. You're winning. Your organization is winning. We're all winning if you're doing those things on a daily basis. So last thing I'll close out with on what does it mean to me being a CI warrant officer. It is a fact to me in my head and my mind of years that if it were not for becoming a warrant officer, specifically a counterintelligence warrant officer in the United States Army, I would not have served as long as I served. This is coming from a guy who, and I've got the receipts, right? So for all the, like Shawn said, all the people in the back, the naysayers, right? I have the receipts. I was clearly destined and on a track of my own to screw up to sergeant major. I was the third 97 Bravo to become a drill sergeant. The other two were sergeant majors, Cecil Simi and Gary Jones, right? And it was because of the mentorship of Gary Jones. Gary Jones, when I wanted to decline drill sergeant, Gary Jones, retired Command Sergeant Major Gary Jones, once the MI Corps CSM, pulled me aside and said, no, you need to go to drill sergeant school. And he pointed that fact out to me. He said, you know how many 97 Bravo drill sergeants we have? And he pointed that out to me. It's me and Cecil. So we've selected you to be next, right? Made Sergeant First Class. I just didn't get a chance to enjoy it because, hang up in promotions of 19 months waiting to pin it on. By that time, I was at Fort Rucker, and they made a mockery out of it because I got promoted while at Fort Rucker. And so they gave me an invitation to leave Rucker and go and be a Sergeant First Class. My point in saying all of that is to simply tell the young NCO out there who's looking at becoming a warrant officer, the young warrant officer out there who's trying to find their way. You are it. You are everything. You need to just go do it. Do your best at it. Use those resources around you, which include the people, and just get up every day. Put one foot before the other and enjoy it. I still love it. You can probably tell. I still love it. I really would not have served as long as I served in any other capacity. I sincerely mean that. No knock on the CSMs. I would not have done it that long. On the O grade side, and I'm only saying that because guess what? If I went O grade, it takes me away from counterintelligence. That's why I'm saying it. Not that I don't feel like I was capable of rising through the ranks as an O grade. I just didn't want to be a generalist, as we've talked about earlier. So that's probably a long answer, but it's my answer and it's my passion. And thank you for the question, Jeremy.
No, I love it, Glenn. I'm going to go run and take that hill because that fired me up. I am ready. That was awesome. Mike, send that paperwork over. We're going to give a huge donation to the Warrant Officer Association. Hoorah, well said, Glenn. Thank you. I'm going to give it to Scott for the last one.
All right. Well, I never made it to CW5. I punched out a little bit before that, right? But I was a warrant officer, so I'm part of the club here, right? And I will tell you that what drew me to the warrant officer corps, quite frankly, is like all of these guys said. The technical expertise aspect of it, the ability to continue to do, the counterintelligence, craft throughout the life of, my career. And quite frankly, it was mentors, right? I mean, before I became a warrant officer, I was serving with guys like Don Corona and, Tom O'Connor was my, my career advisor and, a couple other folks, right, is what it boils down to. But I wanted to be those guys, right? So, I mean, that was what I tried, wanted to do is what it boils down to. And then when I did it, it really reinforced the fact that, I loved the fact that, I worked hard to become, a technical expert, right, and live up to the expectation that I was, a warrant officer in the CI career field. But the beauty of being a warrant officer in the CI career field is that when you walk into the room, there is a level of trust that is bestowed upon you before you even open your mouth, right? So you can ruin it for yourself if you don't deliver, right? But you walk in with some authority is what it boils down to. And there is an expectation that, if you want to speak truth to power, that's going to make total sense coming out of your mouth because you're a warrant officer and you've got, you've got the best interest in mind. You're going to say what you think and you don't have to worry about, beating around the bush is what it boils down to. So there's some beauty in all of that. And above and beyond that is that, of course, you have the opportunity to mentor up and down the chain, right? Young folks that are brand new to the program, you can take out on the road. Your peers, you bounce ideas off of one another. Your supervisors, you make sure that they're dialed in correctly. So it's just the perfect place to be. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. If there's ever a regret, sometimes I certainly regret, punching out when I did and not sticking around longer. But yeah, I love the fact that I was a warrant officer, and I highly recommend it for anybody that wants to make a career out of Army counterintelligence.
All these years and decades of experience on the screen right now, and wow, every one of you, thank you so much for the mentorship through my career. And I can't believe we didn't break the internet and the podcast, to be honest, because all this knowledge that's being dropped. But Scott, I'm going to give it back to you, brother.
So we'll start based on where you fall on my screen. So we'll start with Shawn, then go to Traci, then we'll go to Glenn, and then we'll go to Mike. So we got a lot of listeners out there. A lot of them are, either, currently serving CI professionals. A lot of them are just, aspiring, CI professionals, or maybe they're just fascinated by the craft of CI. So, just what's your parting thought, to our audience is what it boils down to. It can be anything you want it to be. So Shawn, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'd say do it. Jump in. Don't let anything hold you back. Don't fear failure. Get after the adversary. There's no bad interview. Get in there and learn, and it's just really get after it, right? That's my advice. Don't wait for someone to hand you an opportunity in this craft. Develop your own opportunities and just continue to push forward through grit, determination, competency, and all the things we need out of you to be able to be an absolute tremendous counterintelligence professional. It was just that simple. Drive your own career and don't wait for anything to be handed to you, and get out there and just execute. Over.
Good deal. Traci?
I would say get up every day and build that passion as you get up and get ready to go to work. And sometimes you're going to be staying late. You're going to be going in early. Embrace it, because every opportunity that you have to learn is an opportunity for you to better yourself. Make mistakes. We're all going to make them. Just don't make the same mistake twice. Make a new mistake and keep moving. And every single mistake that you make, take the lessons from it, put them in your kit bag, and keep on marching. Realize that this is a passion. This is not just a vocation. It is an avocation. And the passion has to be there in order for you to succeed, to learn, to absorb, to love to read, and to be able to be the example for the other people that you work with, whether they're CI or not. Make them envious of who you are and what you do.
Absolutely awesome. Yeah, Glenn, you're next up, buddy.
All right, so I got 5 points, and they're very simple and straightforward. Because this is one of those questions where it's easy, but it's tough because there's a lot we can say, and we've said a lot over these what will become iterations or sessions. Point number 1: you're not alone. You're never alone. Period. Whether that's in a personal or professional demeanor, you are never alone. And that moment that you think you're alone and unafraid, or not unafraid and afraid, and getting nervous about something, or you're stressing, just stop for a moment, breathe, and remember you're not alone. That's the exact moment in time you need to reach out to someone in your network, colleague, friend, whatever, right? Again, personal or professional, you're never alone. Grasp the understanding that teamwork is indeed dream work. It sounds cliche, but if you really grasp the understanding, and more importantly, comprehend why that became a saying, you will find yourself in a good place and realize you're never alone. Number 2, don't ever get too comfortable. Don't ever get too comfortable, because when you get too comfortable, you're no longer growing. You're no longer growing. You're getting stale, and nothing positive is going to happen that point forward over time. The longer is like bread, right? When it starts to mold and rot, it just gets worse. So don't get too comfortable. Number 3, you're not defined by the moment or the situation. Now, as Scott said, you can open your mouth and make the biggest fool of yourself. But take what Traci then said is, you made that mistake, just don't make it again. So you're never defined by the moment or the situation. That's where you fall back on all those basic principles that you've learned to this point, be it your character, your ethics, your morals, blah, 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 right? Because we're talking about super smart and intelligent people in the business of counterintelligence. So you're not defined by the moment or the situation. Number 4, learn the art of your craft, because training and baseline education is science. That's all that is. That's science. Now you need to learn the art of your craft, which brings me to my 5th and final point. You're playing chess, not checkers. This is a game of chess and not checkers. And just like I said about all the other cliches, you have to really appreciate comprehend what that means. But those are the 5 points I'll leave with our audience. And thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome, Glenn. Thanks. Great points, all 5. Mike, you're going to bring us home here.
All right. Yeah. So very similar to some of the other ones. So I lumped it together as read, learn, and constantly improve yourself, right? Whether that's personally, professionally, as you move forward in your life, right? In this craft, right? It's knowing where you came from, knowing what our rules and guidelines are that establish that, and then moving forward. And as Shawn pointed out, you don't be afraid to get out there and lead from the front, right? And don't be afraid to make a mistake. Again, don't make just don't make the same one again. So let's read, learn, and improve yourself. Find a passion, right? For me and for all of us here, obviously it's counterintelligence. But with a passion comes, I've always grouped into 2 people. You can be compliant or you can be committed. Strive to be a committed counterintelligence professional. Don't be just compliant. And then counterintelligence is not a 9-to-5 job. You got to get out away from your desk, out of your office, and talk to people. It's not going to just come to you. You have to get out there and talk to folks. That's what's the nature of the business. And then finally, be a mentor. Identify where, civilians, those young soldiers that are coming behind you, who's the future. Somebody took the time to help us, probably took the time to help you that are listening, and you owe it to do the same thing and identify those folks and mentor and bring them forward. That's my point.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Jeremy, you're going to take us to the close?
All right, let's do it. It's been a marathon session. Truly do appreciate everybody's time. You're masters in the crafts and Jedi masters at that. Subject matter experts. And there's so many words I could say, but the audience out there, they had a couple of words. I'm going to pull one specifically from Sonny in Virginia. Whether they knew it or not, all of them will forever be important to me as a fellow warrant officer, a CI pro, and friend. I would just want them to all to know to cast, let me redo that. I would just want them all to know they cast a wake behind them that the junior force receives from the likes of us who remained engaged. This podcast allows the junior force to know those who carved the trail and continue to make impact. Thank you for telling your stories. Thank you for telling your time. And again, from Sonny down in Virginia, I appreciate that. I think he summed it up very well. Until next time, guys. And Scott, you want to take us out?
Yeah, sure. So, you've listened to some serious counterintelligence professionals here today. So, if you love counterintelligence like we do, go to ixnsolutions.com and check out our IXN dispatch offering, right? There's a link to it where you can see a bunch of articles that we post. All the podcasts that you listen to here today are available at IXN Dispatch as well. Become a member is what it boils down to. We also have links to some CI swag, much like that purple 3-6 shirt that Jeremy's wearing that we referenced earlier today. You can get it. There's a link to that as well, right? So if you join the IXN Dispatch as a paying member, you actually also get access to Dispatch Central, which is our Discord channel, where all the folks, here on the screen and other CI professionals can interact with you, in chat rooms and, kind of have a sort of a CI dialogue that, ends up, in a closed environment. So, by all means, if you love CI, hit ixnsolutions.com and figure out the ways that you can continue to have a relationship with us.
I know, great. So, hey, one last thing before we finally close it down. I failed to do this. Lady, gentlemen, cheers. Thank you so much for the time.
Chiefs, cheers.
The Jedi Masters. All right.
Cheers.
So, for anybody out there, if you want the IXN team to cover down on a topic, go ahead and send it our way. If you want to be a guest, well, let's have a conversation. And then recognize, react, and report. Till next time, thanks for giving us a listen.